The knock came exactly at midnight, but everything that changed began much earlier that bright afternoon. By the time the moon rose over the quiet neighborhood, one desperate young woman would be standing outside a stranger's door with tears in her eyes and a promise that could either destroy 2 lives or save them both forever. Neither of them knew that before the next sunrise, they would be forced to choose between fear and love, pride and sacrifice, and a future that no one believed they deserved. Sometimes destiny does not announce itself with celebration. Sometimes it arrives exhausted, trembling, and carrying only hope. Before we begin this unforgettable journey, please take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind us hope can appear when we least expect it. Morning sunlight spilled across the small town of Maple Ridge, painting every street with a warm golden glow. People greeted one another by name, children rode bicycles through quiet neighborhoods, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from the family bakery on Oak Street. It was the kind of town where everyone believed they knew everyone else's story, but the truth was that the deepest struggles were often hidden behind the brightest smiles. At the edge of town stood a modest white house with blue shutters where 29-year-old Rowan Mercer lived alone. His life was ordinary in every possible way. He repaired antique furniture in a small workshop behind his house, spending his days restoring broken tables, cracked rocking chairs, and forgotten family heirlooms. While others chased wealth and recognition, Rowan found peace in giving damaged things another chance. Every scratch told a story, every crack carried a memory, and every careful repair reminded him that almost nothing was beyond saving. Few people knew why Rowan preferred solitude. 5 years earlier, he had planned to marry the woman he had loved since college. Just weeks before their wedding, she left without explanation, choosing a glamorous life in another city over the quiet future they had planned together. The heartbreak did more than end a relationship. It shattered Rowan's confidence. Since then, he had convinced himself that love belonged to other people, not to someone like him. His days followed the same peaceful routine. He opened the workshop early, greeted loyal customers with kindness, worked patiently until evening, and returned home to simple dinners and old books. It was not the life he had imagined as a younger man, but it was stable, and after years of disappointment, stability felt like enough. Across town, another life looked perfect from the outside while quietly falling apart. Maris Vale was 26 years old, intelligent, compassionate, and admired wherever she went. She taught art classes at the community center, inspiring children to paint their dreams instead of their fears. Parents praised her patience. Her students adored her gentle encouragement. Neighbors admired her constant smile. Only Maris knew how difficult it had become to keep smiling. Her father, Alton Vale, was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the county. Success had hardened him into a man who believed everything, including happiness, could be measured, negotiated, and controlled. After Maris's mother died years earlier, he buried his grief beneath endless work, convincing himself that protecting his daughter meant making every decision for her. As Maris grew older, protection slowly transformed into control. He chose where she studied, who she spent time with, what career she pursued, and eventually whom she should marry. Every decision came wrapped in the language of love, yet every choice stole another piece of her freedom. That summer, Alton announced he had arranged a marriage between Maris and the ambitious son of one of his business partners. The engagement would strengthen both families, secure important contracts, and preserve the family's reputation. None of those reasons mattered to Maris. She barely knew the man. He admired wealth more than kindness, status more than character, and spoke about marriage as though it were another business investment. Every conversation left Maris feeling invisible. When she finally gathered the courage to refuse, her father's disappointment quickly turned into anger. He gave her an impossible ultimatum. If she truly believed she should choose her own husband, then she had exactly 1 day to prove she was capable of doing so. By midnight, she had to introduce him to the man she intended to marry. If she failed, she would accept the arranged marriage without another argument. It sounded less like a challenge and more like a sentence. Throughout the sunny afternoon, Maris wandered through town searching for answers that refused to appear. Friends sympathized but feared confronting her powerful father. Acquaintances offered pity instead of solutions. Every passing hour made the deadline feel heavier. She sat beside the river as children laughed nearby, wondering how a place filled with so much happiness could leave one person feeling completely alone. Sometimes desperation changes the way we see the world. Late that afternoon, Maris stopped outside Rowan's workshop after noticing an elderly widow struggling to carry an old rocking chair. Before anyone else reacted, Rowan stepped outside, lifted the chair effortlessly, smiled warmly, and repaired one broken leg without asking for payment. The old woman tried to offer money anyway. Rowan simply thanked her for trusting him and wished her a peaceful evening. Maris watched quietly from across the street. She noticed something rare. He wasn't kind because someone was watching. He was kind because kindness had become part of who he was. That single moment stayed with her long after she walked away. As evening settled over Maple Ridge, Rowan closed his workshop and returned home, unaware that someone else's future had begun orbiting around a simple act of compassion. Meanwhile, Maris spent hours wrestling with impossible thoughts. She knew approaching a stranger was absurd. She knew asking anyone to pretend to be her fiancé crossed every reasonable boundary. Yet every other door had already closed. The sun disappeared beneath the horizon. Streetlights flickered to life. The town grew quieter. Every ticking minute echoed louder inside her heart. At nearly 11:30, she finally stood outside Rowan's house, unable to gather enough courage to knock. She almost left. Twice. Each time she reached the gate, she remembered the life waiting for her if she surrendered. A marriage without affection. A future chosen by someone else. A lifetime of pretending. Finally, just before midnight, she lifted her trembling hand. The knock echoed through the silent street. Inside, Rowan looked up from the book resting on his lap. Visitors at that hour almost never brought good news. He opened the door carefully. Standing beneath the porch light was the same young woman he had noticed watching his workshop that afternoon. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her hands shook from exhaustion. She looked less like someone asking for help than someone running out of hope. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence itself seemed to carry years of hidden pain. When Maris finally found her voice, every carefully rehearsed sentence disappeared. Only the truth remained. Her father had given her one night to find a husband. And she had nowhere else to go. Rowan stared in disbelief. Nothing about the situation made sense. Yet something inside him refused to close the door. Perhaps it was the fear in her eyes. Perhaps it was because he recognized the loneliness hiding behind her desperate courage. Or perhaps life was quietly placing two broken hearts on the same path. He invited her inside. She explained everything. Not dramatically. Not to earn sympathy. Simply because she no longer had the strength to hide the truth. Rowan listened without interruption. As the story unfolded, he realized she wasn't asking for romance. She was asking for dignity. For one chance to choose her own future. Helping her could destroy his peaceful life. Refusing her could destroy hers. Outside, the first drops of summer rain began tapping softly against the windows. Inside, two strangers sat across from one another while the clock crept toward midnight. Neither realized that the decision made during those next few minutes would become the beginning of a story the entire town would remember for generations, not because it started with love, but because it started with compassion.